Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm going to give everyone a few moments to get into the Zoom webinar before we kick things off. We are recording today, so if you have a friend who you knew wanted to attend and couldn't make it, you can always send them the link to watch it later. Okay, let's get started. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for Conquer Your Career, International and Global Careers. My name is Toni Phelan, and I'm a program manager for MBA programs at Forté. So I am delighted to be joined today by three experts in this field. They're all MBA women with post-business school, international and global careers. Layla Aref is a Finance Excellence Program Associate at Siemens AG, and she's an IESE MBA from 2020. Lizzie Pedikowski is an associate consultant at Systemic. She received her MBA in 2020 from Imperial College Business School. Jessica Lunsford is a strategy and PMO manager at AB InBev. She is a 2021 IESE MBA alum. So panelists, welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. I'd like to get the conversation started by just briefly getting to know a little bit about you and your backgrounds. So Layla, let's start with you. Your pre-MBA experience was kind of focused mainly in financial services in South Africa before you went back to school. So can you tell us a little more about your professional background and what ended up leading you to pursue an MBA?
Sure. So yes, I'm South African born and raised, and started off my career with financial audit at PwC, moved over to transaction advisory services, Morgan Stanley. Oh, sorry, we have a load shedding here. Morgan Stanley also had a joint venture with a local bank, and I did equity research with them. The other, I'm trying to think, and then I also worked for the local investment bank doing mezzanine financing, equity financing. And really, what I wanted to immigrate, and I thought that a good way to do that and also build my leadership skills as well as my international network would be the MBA. I think coming from South Africa as a chartered accountant, my career was very institutionalized. It kind of was like chase this front office job, and I maybe never considered anything else besides that, front office position. So I think the MBA was just a way for me to also take a step back and reconsider my career and what I wanted and what my own definition of success was, for me, not anyone else's.
I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to Lizzie. So your professional experience consists of work in the nonprofit and sustainability fields. Can you tell us more about your career path and maybe how it changed after receiving your advanced degrees?
Sure. Thanks so much, guys, for having me. I'm actually originally from Chicago, but prior to the MBA and the master's I pursued in London, I was working in Washington, D.C. for the Environmental Defense Fund and the United Nations Foundation. And I focused on issues of sustainability and climate change, which is a bit somewhat non-traditional for business school, but I was really passionate about combining these elements together. So combining traditional business knowledge with sustainability so that I could convince different types of stakeholders that this is in their best interest and that there's a business case for sustainability to be embedded more widely across different sectors. So that was my motivation for going to school. But I knew I also wanted to get a global education and meet different people from other countries. And so I really, really wanted to go to school in the UK. Ended up applying and got accepted to two different schools that I couldn't choose between. So I did both. I did a master's in international development at the London School of Economics, which is very academic, very traditional master's curriculum. And then I went straight into a full-time MBA at Imperial College Business School and have been working ever since.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Jessica, let's get to know you. So prior to your MBA, the majority of your career was working with customers and clients kind of in the auto insurance industry. So can you tell us a little more about yourself and what led you to pursue your MBA abroad?
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to be here with everyone. So I'm Jessica. I'm from Virginia originally, but as Toni said, I worked for insurance companies in both Atlanta and Denver before pursuing an MBA. I really loved the opportunity to work with people, help them get out of a tough situation. And I was handling claims originally myself, moved into some management roles. But the industry was very siloed and it was hard to get more into the strategy aspect of things. So I knew I wanted to get to work with bigger pictures, influence, have a little more strategic background in what I was doing. And so I wanted to get to an MBA and pivot. And then I was going to make a big career move, quit my job, move to an expensive city. I figured I might as well do that in an international setting as well. So I looked at MBAs focused in Europe, so I could also get a cultural background change and meet new people across the world, get more diversity in my education as well, instead of just staying in the US. So that's how I ended up at a school in Spain. I wanted to work with big companies that had big brands, big strategy, big impact, which is why I focused on consumer goods companies in Europe. Ended up at AB InBev, which is amazing. Love beer, big fan. Europe is a place to have great beer. So it worked out very well.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Okay, so I would love to dive into some of our kind of predetermined questions here. Attendees, if you have questions as we go along, we will have a Q&A portion of the event at the end. So feel free to put your questions in the Q&A rather than the chat. That's where we'll be pulling our questions from. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see you all. All right, so the first question that I'd love to ask, we'll start with you, Layla. What is the value of working abroad? How has your international experience kind of enhanced your career?
Yeah, it's just exposed me to the type of work that, that I just wouldn't have exposure to here in South Africa necessarily. So, a lot of the deals I've been working on at Siemens are so much bigger. Of course, there's the cultural aspect, learning from different people, how they do things, the power in diversity. And for me, it's just been really great trying to understand how other people do things, and it's just given me a lot more options. So I'm in a rotational program that's 8 months each. It's a 2-year program, and unlike some other programs, Siemens has made it a tailor-made program where you get to decide where you are going. So I've literally got the choice of all of these countries that Siemens operates in, all facets of the business, not just finance. I'm now in a strategy team. So that ability to also pick up the phone and just network myself into a role is not something I could have necessarily done in a local environment. So yeah, it's just kind of, I would say, the breadth and variation of opportunities that the international career has provided me. And I'm still just figuring out my next role. And again, people are like, what city do you want to be in? And sometimes it's a little scary having all these options, but it's also nice having all that flexibility.
Yes, very much. Choose your own adventure. That's really cool. Jessica, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the biggest value, I think, is I work for a big multinational organization. It's full of M&As from literally all over the world. We're the biggest brewer globally. So in my office, the cultural diversity is widespread. We work with people from South Africa, from Brazil, from Japan, like all over the world are based here. So for me, the biggest value that I have is kind of the cultural experience. In the US, my job was very homogenous. It was Americans working with Americans, similar perspectives. So I've been able to learn a lot about other cultures, geopolitical things that are happening. There's people that are experiencing that firsthand that in the US you feel distanced from. So being in someone else's closer to their shoes gives you a different perspective. So for me and for my career and my future growth, like even if I go back to the US and transition back to that culture, I think I have better understanding now. I can communicate with people from other cultures better. It gives me more perspective, which lets me think differently and drive strategy differently, especially in a company that touches all aspects of the world.
Great. Yes, broadening your perspectives is definitely one benefit. Okay, so I'd like to go on to our second question. And Elizabeth, let's start with you for this one. So when it comes to the reality of being abroad or living somewhere that you are not from, What are the pros and cons? Talk a little bit about kind of some of the challenges and the highlights that you've experienced.
Absolutely. So on the pro side, I mean, these are, I think, the most obvious, the most attractive of this career path is like the travel's amazing. You get so many unique opportunities to engage with different cultures. Like a lot of what Layla and Jessica just outlined is exactly what I love about this career choice. You get challenged in exciting ways. You get to level up your career. You get to meet interesting people. You get to like have this very dynamic experience where you're put out of your comfort zone in a good way and reap all of those benefits in a way that you can apply to your career, you can apply it to your personal life, and just very, very profound ways. I can't say enough good things, but I do think there's a set of like reality that comes in after you get settled, after you get over the initial excitement, that doesn't maybe get as much attention. It's sort of, especially for those who would be living outside of their home country specifically, there's like a layer of complexity that this is going to add to your life that will like never really go away. And I'm very boring to talk about, but people are constantly asking me like about taxes, right? Because Americans have to pay taxes both in America and any other country you work in. Visas, what do you do if your company can't sponsor you? How do you navigate that world? What if it gets taken away or something, like lose your job, God forbid, or other things happen? Your 401k, right? You removed yourself out of this US-based system that you're probably very used to and comfortable. You may have a pension in another country, but how are you going to navigate that? I still don't know, because I probably won't have to deal with that until I'm 60, but like at some point that's probably going to be an issue for me. And then just the reality of living far from home, probably from your friends and your close family. And just as I've been in London for 4 years now, I've missed 3 close family funerals, and like that sucks. But it is the reality of when you live abroad and how often you can get home, or what's your schedule and your work life balance, and able to facilitate doing that. So it's amazing, but this is also the reality I think of many of us are facing.
Thank you for sharing that. Layla, let's go to you for this one. I'd love to hear about your kind of pros and cons of working and living abroad.
Sure. So, I'm also in a very unique situation in that it is a rotational program. So even more so, there's a lot more uncertainty and instability. So, working in LA, of course, quite an isolating time zone difference as well. So I think, it's just, I think, kind of really small things like, oh, you need to find a new, hairdresser and all of the local things. And, people think those are kind of small things, but it's a big deal, to kind of settle in a new city every time. So I've moved, nearly 4 times in the past 2 years post the MBA. And I guess it's as exciting as it is to go to a new city. It's unsettling. You have to make new friends, just kind of the basic things like, how do I pay my gas? And, there's lots of different ways to do that in different places. So yeah, all of that stuff is really hard. But at the same time, of course, it's amazing getting to experience the new food and the new culture and just really gain that different perspective. But yeah, I don't want to say it's been easy. It's definitely been isolating at times. And of course, making friends as an adult is not always easy. So I would say it really also depends on your lifestyle and what you want and where you want to settle down. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for bringing up those kind of day-to-day little things that, outside of work. What does that reality look like? Jessica, what do you have to add to this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I echo both things that Lizzie and Layla said, because I definitely feel all of those. I think a couple additional things. An added benefit is you start to meet people who live all over the world. So if you go travel somewhere, you can get local recommendations. So there are a lot of benefits to having a wider network when you're traveling and doing those sort of things, similar to what Lizzie said. I think for me, living in Belgium, an added layer is that I don't speak the local language. I have very okay tourism tourist Spanish, which is not helpful in a country where they speak French and Dutch. So for me, an added layer is I'm learning a little bit of basics, but I mean, learning a whole new language in your 30s is not ideal, not the age to do that. And for me, using public transit, there's an announcement. I have no idea what that announcement says. I'm probably never going to know. I look around to see if people's faces look panicked or not panicked. If it's not panicked, I assume we're fine. So it's just those, again, the things that you don't think about, like moving to a foreign country and like living in Spain for 2 years sounds glamorous and great, but as Layla was explaining, the day-to-day, it kind of wears on you over time. And it's things that you don't really appreciate when you leave things that you're comfortable from. So just things to consider when you're looking abroad. It's exciting and it's super fun, but the day-to-day can be a little bit more difficult and wear on you as you go.
Thank you. Yeah, that language barrier would definitely be tough. So Elizabeth, let's go back to you for a third question. What are the challenges that global business leaders face? And are there any specific challenges that women face working globally?
That's a really good one. So in terms of the first part, so what do global leaders face with decision making? I think the absolute biggest mistake that I see and that I've studied is applying your viewpoint and your perspective into international context. And I mean, I think we can all think of like a million examples, whether it's governments like deploying aid to a country that like they just assume is going to operate exactly like if you're deploying aid in the US, or it's a business that operates like really successfully in one context and they just want to like plant that in a completely different market. I'm thinking like Starbucks in Australia or Walmart going into Canada. They think that everything is just going to operate exactly like it's at home. And these are huge, massive, multi-billion-dollar fails and rollout. So I think that's just a huge, huge thing to keep in mind if you're going to be working in this context, no matter what area or what sector. But my tips for that, where I think it works really, really well, is to like engage with local stakeholders, hire them for your team, engage with them in person. If you can travel to where they are to get a feel for the context that you're going to be working or operating in, and like genuinely solicit their feedback and learn from them, not impose on them. And that's really a lot easier said than done, but I think it's super important to remember. And the other tip I think that's really easy to forget is if you're you're the primary office or the home context or whatever, and you're dealing with other people or other offices in different countries, don't always schedule things when it's super convenient for you and give them the night call or the night shift or the early morning slot so that you can accommodate everybody and that you're not always just accommodating yourself with the noon o'clock time frame that works best for you. The second part of the question was around specific challenges to women. And this is tough, but I can give a good example of, I work in the sustainability world. I work with all different kinds of cultures. Most recently in November, there was what's called the COP 27, which was held in Egypt, right? So that is a country that is just not very welcoming of women, and especially women in business. And so there was an added layer for the women attendees to go to dress modestly, to adhere and make sure you're safe, adhere to local standards. And I also think we had to call more upon our male colleagues to step in when we needed their help. So there were several instances where certain women were feeling unsafe in a situation, whether it was like negotiating their cab ride home or walking on the streets, and that's when we had to rely on our male colleagues to like accompany us and maybe go out of their way to make sure that we're all looking out for each other. So just in really practical terms, it can be very difficult when you're working in scenarios and cultures that just put men on a different pedestal than women, and you have to navigate that and still hold your own space, but do that in a way that's really respectful and also doesn't offend anyone. So navigating that, I think, is another layer that's specifically difficult for women.
Thank you so much, Lizzie, for sharing that. That's a good example. Layla, can we hear from you on this one?
Sure. So, I mean, for me, maybe I'll start with the challenges that women specifically face, and I'll echo what Lizzie said. I think it's understanding the culture that you're in, what the nuances are. Like in the US, I've worked in there, it's, gender diversity is a topic everyone wants to advocate for, everyone's proud to be involved in. And I sometimes found more in the European context, it's a little bit of almost a dirty word sometimes, and you can also isolate yourself if you come across too much of a strong advocate. So it's trying to understand really how it's perceived within the business, but at the same time be true to yourself and advocate to what's important to you. So I think that was a specific challenge I faced, because I've always been very active in these kind of initiatives. But then someone said, it's not always perceived very well. It could be seen as complaining, and trying to really navigate that and change other people's mindsets, or some in different contexts. In terms of what global challenges global leaders face overall, I think something that I've noticed that's very tough is kind of setting that tone at the top and making sure that it filters through to everybody, and that all the way, to the regions, that everybody has the same culture. Of course, every local culture is very different, but as a global leader, you do want certain cornerstones of your value system to permeate throughout the whole culture. And I think making sure that message gets through all those layers and is consistent is not very easy. And also, I think something that in these multinationals that's a little hard is, besides navigating the geopolitical risk, which everyone's aware of, is really just making sure that everybody talks to each other and there aren't these silos. Because I think sometimes it's a lot about people being too arrogant, for lack of a better word, to reach out to a colleague and say, can I get your insights on this? So, because, maybe one region wants to seem to be the know-it-all and the pioneer, and yeah, it just creates a bit of animosity. And I think the challenge for global leaders is to rather create that foster collaboration instead of competitiveness.
That's such a great point. Communication and kind of setting the example is so key. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to move on to our fourth question, and Jessica, we'll start with you for this one, and then we'll go to you, Lizzie. So if a student is not immediately pursuing an international career post-MBA, what should they consider to make a move later? Any tips that you have for current students?
Yeah, so I think I highly recommend it. I love it, but I can say it is not going to be for everyone. So a couple of things to consider is, what is your long-term career ambition, right? So depending on what you want to do, is there any value add to working domestically, going abroad for realistically 2 to 5 years, and then coming back? So does it help your long-term ambition and goals? Is that the experience that your company or the career path that you're on will value when you move back domestically, if that's the choice you make? Or does that actually hinder your kind of progression, right? If you go to Europe or you go to Asia and you work for a business that maybe the companies back home don't recognize or see as prestigious as a local company, could that hurt you in the long run? So you really need to assess on, where you see yourself in the long term, and if there's really value into you getting that great personal experience, you learning how to work with other cultures and having that, but will that be recognized and respected and valued when you do want to come back domestically? Because it's not always the case that people will appreciate that and then the work you've done abroad. I also think another thing to consider is, if you don't do it straight out of the MBA, is when you start working domestically, where is your network? Obviously, if you have an MBA and if it's international, you can leverage that, which is great. But the farther you get away from your MBA class, the less of your work that they see. And so can they really, vouch for you if you want to reference? How are you maintaining that network abroad so you can make that move? If you're not in the local market, it's harder to get that first interview. It's harder to sell yourself if you don't have a network or a reference helping you get that first leg in, because obviously local hires are much more convenient than necessarily international hires, depending on what the company is looking for that you're applying to. And then I think the third thing is kind of what we talked about in one of the previous questions is like your personal life, right? So after the MBA, you start to settle somewhere. You build a community there. You potentially have a partner or a spouse. Maybe you're closer to your family if you're staying domestically. To make that change 5 years down the line, that's a big ask for also a partner or a spouse. Are they up for that challenge too? It's a life change for them. Do you guys do distance if they can't make that change themselves for their career or what they have going on personally? So there's a lot to consider. Again, I recommend it. I love it, but you really need to think long and hard. But it is a big change personally and professionally that can impact a move back.
Yes, lots to consider. That's a great point too. Personal life and what you want that to look like. Lizzie, let's hear from you.
Totally agree with everything Jessica just said, but I have maybe just 3 points to add on to that. The first is that if you're already in an MBA or in a program, but not, maybe this is on the horizon, but you don't know exactly where it's going to go, absolutely take the time to meet people in your class from other countries and form like genuine relationships with them. I think it's so easy to, especially like because I went to school in a different country, it's so easy to just like stay with people who you're comfortable with. So I always found myself like gravitating towards the other Americans because, there's like a group of 6 of us and we all like can relate on so many different levels. It's very, very easy to fall into that trap of just talking to and like socializing and hanging out with this people that are the most similar to you, and those are going to be people most likely who are from the same country as you. So take that extra effort to make friends with other people. And I think if you're going to an MBA program in the States and you are American and this is something you're just interested in, like make them feel welcome, invite them to a Thanksgiving during the first term, or like let them know what it's like to live in America, help them out with tips, like just be a genuine friend and ally, because it is difficult and you never know what they might be needing, and that you can help to kind of help them settle in, and that's going to forge lifelong friendships that you can draw on for the rest of your career and the rest of your life. So highly recommend that. The second bit is to learn how to translate your domestic experience into global experience, because everything is global, like everything is global experience. So for instance, I know a lot, I never really worked in politics, but I lived in DC, right? So I know a ton about American politics. I know about how legislation passes through our government and how it doesn't, what the bottlenecks are and the challenges. Like I know all of that information just from living in America. And that's actually very valuable information to bring to a European context where they're trying to keep an eye on something that's passing through the US Congress and how that's going to impact their market and their legislation. So just because it's viewed as domestic doesn't mean it's not valuable. So it's all about translating that and figuring out how your experience in one place relates to or can help aid in the conversation in a different space. So learn that skill set for sure. The third and final tip, just to go through this really quickly, but if you're not in an MBA yet or not in a grad school program and you're in the pre-MBA stage, you can be really strategic about where you apply to school. You can either apply like Jessica and I did and Layla, right, in a different country and have that take you to the country of your choice. And work and then try to hopefully work after, because you'll be already settled and kind of getting yourself up. Or you can also strategically look at visa programs, and I'm thinking of one specifically in the UK. So if the UK is on your brain, if you go to a set list of schools like Harvard, Yale, NYU, like there's a whole list of US schools. And if you go there and you graduate, it's what's called a high potential individual. And you, for the next 5 years, can have a 2-year work visa in the UK because they were trying to bring in talent overseas. So it's really just, it's probably worth a Google. So like, that's what I know about the UK. I'm sure there's others for Europe or other places, like where if you went to school and it's a really, really good school, it might open up doors later down the line that you could take advantage of without having to have physically be there and need that work visa sponsorship, which can be more difficult to obtain.
Those are great tips, Lizzie. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. And that leads us kind of really well into the next question for Layla. So if someone is interested in finding global career opportunities or positioning themselves strategically for global opportunities, whether they're in school, looking at an MBA program, or they're post MBA, what are some things you can kind of do maybe in the recruiting process or in your job search process, or activities you can do while you're an MBA student, anything that can help you stand out for these opportunities?
Sure. So I think Lizzie covered some of it, but of course, choosing the right school in the right region is important. Also, different schools are strong in different things. Sometimes, like ESA was very strong in the startup community, for example. So it's important to also position yourself or apply to a school that really, is respected within their community. So, or if you're interested in investment banking, it has to be one of the schools from, which they recruit from specifically would be a good way to position yourself for that. Of course, I mean, a lot of these schools, companies, when they come to the MBA programs, they'll make it very clear what sort of visa sponsorship they have. So I don't know that much about the US schools particularly, but I at the time was like, I want to work in Europe, and so ESA is a good school, and I want to do a 2-year program. So that was kind of my thinking and why I went there. I must admit that during the time I was in the MBA, people were like, oh, it's going to be tough for you to end up working in Europe. A lot of finance people maybe should go, it'll be easier for you in London. So let me put it this way, it wasn't easy. I had to also be flexible and kind of keep my ear to the ground in terms of what the opportunities were. And basically, like, I didn't come into the MBA saying, this is the company I want to work for, and I've now ended up working there. I wanted an international career, and this is one of the companies that could provide that. And of course, ticked a whole lot of other boxes, but you need to kind of be flexible on what it is, what your priorities are. If an international career is one of them, then you need to be a bit flexible about that. And of course, I think I know from a recruiting standpoint, just from our international program, something they look out for a lot is still someone who has some international work experience. So even if, if someone who just hasn't just worked in their own home country, and yes, of course, international MBA helps with that, network and international experience. But if you have the opportunity to gain some additional work experience outside your home country, I understand from a recruiting point of view, that's very attractive as well. But yeah, I would think flexibility and tenacity, is the main thing.
Great. Thank you so much for your insights on that one. Yeah, doing your research, putting that work in for sure. That leads us again really well into our next question for Jessica. So if someone knows that they want international experience, what kinds of things should they be looking for in a company?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to probably echo a lot of what Layla was talking about, because research here will be super, super helpful. So I think the biggest thing is you probably want a company that is multinational or has offices in multiple locations. That generally means they're more open to people moving from location to location. Their senior leadership is probably a mix and very diverse, and that they will appreciate mobility and movement to different areas, especially if you're a strong talent. I think if you're in the MBA or pre-MBA and you're kind of targeting your first job after school, I think what Layla is doing is honestly really great. Doing a rotational program. It gives you a lot of different experience in different areas. You can test and learn a lot. And ideally, you find a program that lets you move to different markets. I know some friends with Citi are doing that. They're doing Singapore, they're doing the US, they're doing other countries as part of that program. So you can test and learn and see what cultural fits you have. But you also know that company is going to let you move and live abroad in the future as well. If those two kind of facets don't work out, you can do a lot of fun LinkedIn research as well. So if there's like a specific company you're looking for, and there's a specific office that you think you want to go in, but you're not sure if they want someone from out of that area, you can look up leaders in the office, right? If you look up that company, you look up specific locations, who's the senior leadership? Are they all, like, I'm in Belgium, are they all Belgian leaders? Maybe they're not as open to international people coming in. If the leadership in that market is diverse, that's probably a good idea that they would be open to different thoughts, different people from different cultures coming in and challenging the status quo, because that's the culture that they have there. So cultural research as well, understanding what the company looks for is really important. So yeah, tactically, like big companies, rotational programs are the good way to go, because you know for sure. But if not, you can do research on kind of the senior leadership and how they're built. You can kind of see what that company probably appreciates and would be looking for as well.
Great, thank you. Those are good tips. And our last question is going to go over to you, Lizzie. So I would love to hear your perspective on, and this might be different depending on who I'm asking, but so if Jessica and Layla, if you want to jump in on this one too, please feel free after Lizzie answers. But are there kind of any hot areas in terms of global career opportunities right now? And where do you see growth opportunities for people?
So I have to make a plug here for working on sustainability and climate change issues, which is the topic of our generation. If you're going to be working on something that is a global issue, you're naturally going to have a global career. Everybody from the accountants to the consultants at my firm are working globally. So this is the hottest area you could possibly find, I think, right now. Just to give you like a snapshot into my day. So I didn't say too much about what I actually do as a consultant, but I specialize in food and agriculture as it relates to sustainable trade and supply chains. So one of those issues is related to like deforestation that's happening in Brazil as a result of cultivation of beef and soy, for example. So my day-to-day, I'm working with a lot of Brazilian colleagues. And then I'm looking at policies that impact Brazil, which I'm then looking at the consumers of these products. So I'm working with China, and I'm working with India, and I'm working with Europe on regulations that impact this. And I'm working with corporates who are buying from these places from the States. So like this is the most global career you could possibly imagine. And so I had to give a plug for sustainability, but maybe some of the other ladies want to jump in with other career paths that I'm forgetting.
Layla or Jessica, any opinions on this one? If not, that's totally fine.
Yeah, so I echo sustainability. I think that is huge, especially as a consumer goods company and a manufacturer. We are having a lot of discussions on how we can reduce our carbon footprint, because our machines are very old and use a lot of oil and gas. So we are working on it. I think outside of that space, just for the consumer goods perspective that I have is the tech. How do you connect directly with consumers? What is that last mile, which is very expensive, very time consuming, very tough. And that's going to be all over the globe. We're going to have the same issues. So in that space, last mile logistics, how do you connect directly consumers? Consumer data is definitely hot topics for the consumer goods, especially manufacturers who usually have to go through a retailer to get to a consumer. We're too far away from the consumer, and we don't get that data quick enough to iterate and innovate at the pace that they want now. So data is key for us understanding.
Yeah, I mean, I think being in finance, a little lucky because the skills are transferable, generally speaking. But at the same time, what I notice in the finance community is there's just really a need for people who understand, that how we can digitalize traditional finance processes. And I think that would probably apply to a lot of other types of work as well. So someone who's passionate about automating processes, dashboards, just making things, easier. I think that kind of person will be sought after in any industry. Yeah, and I would say just in our company, I mean, anything software related and anyone with those kind of skills is really sought after. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you all. So we are going to jump into our audience questions. I'm going to share my screen again and put up the contact information really quick for a couple of our panelists, their companies that they work at. So if anyone is interested in either of these organizations, these are the people that you would want to reach out to. So we can get started with a question. So let's say we've got some people in the audience who maybe they have no international experience. They're not attending the international MBA program. They haven't worked abroad. Is that a huge disadvantage? How much of a disadvantage? How do they maybe overcome that if they're looking at this type of career? And whoever wants to jump in, please just feel free.
Sure. So I think if you can somehow display that you embrace the concept of diversity, so you have an international mindset, even if you haven't worked abroad or studied abroad. But I think that if you're the kind of person who can demonstrate that you've worked in multicultural teams at least, and are respectful and considerate of those cultural differences, I think that goes a long way into convincing someone that you're able to work in an international environment and can bring a lot to the table as well.
I would also say, like, in the field that you're in, or maybe the prior field, if you're already in school, or the field you're interested in, there's international communities for these spaces. So if you have experience in something, is there an international network you can connect with? So even if you're not working with them, if you don't see them face to face, are there communities where you can brainstorm, share ideas, discuss about your experience, or spaces that you're interested in, and build a network in that sense? And then when you go to an interview, or if you go to an application, it's part of a community that you're in, you can talk back on those experiences, what you've learned, what you've gleaned from people in other parts of the world, just to say that, like Layla said, you're interested, you have an international mindset, you're thinking broader than just your own experience, can definitely be something that could be an asset.
Awesome. Thank you both. Another question from the audience. I'm going to skip around a little bit here, but we're getting some questions on kind of salary comparisons and how to kind of, I don't want to say compare them globally, but maybe how do you do your research and know, okay, I'm making this much in the US right now. What do I ask for if I get offered an international job, or vice versa if I want to come home? How talk us through anything around that.
This one's really tough. I mean, with maybe the exception of Dubai, American salaries are some of the highest in the world, generally speaking. So I don't think it's insane to say that if you are considering a career shift to a different country, that you might need to consider a pay cut for a similar role. With that being said, there are a lot of things in the US that you pay for out of pocket that will be covered in many countries, such as healthcare. So, when I look at the differences between the two, my UK salary versus what I could potentially be earning in the States, the federal tax, the state tax, and what I would pay out of pocket for my medical expenses, even with insurance, like I'm at about the same. But I think on paper that the salary tend to scare people a bit because they could be several tens of thousands lower than what you're getting in the States. But when you put it out on paper and what you're also receiving in terms of benefits, social benefits, the cost of tuition out here, like lifestyle, it really, we go back to the pros and cons question, because there are lots of pros that are not just salary related.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Oh, go ahead, Layla.
No, please, you first.
I 100% agree. And I would say, like Lizzie said, the gross number may be scary, but the net is really what you want to walk away with. I'd also say, depending on where you live in the US housing is also very, very expensive, especially in New York, LA, big cities. Big cities in Europe, the housing is not that expensive, except for maybe London, but London is still even cheaper than the New York, for example. So your cost of living will not be as high either. So really that net number takes a lot of math and a lot of fun, but that can make a huge difference. And that's really the number you want to look at.
Yeah, I echo everything Lizzie and Jessica have said. But one thing I would say, because I've done the move from Europe now to LA and moving back, it's also important to consider your basket of goods, right? So you could easily say, okay, what's the difference in cost of living between LA and Munich? But, you know, there's some things that are significantly more expensive in one city versus the other. And if you know those are the type of things you spend a lot of money on, and where you prefer you spend your money on, it's just something to take in consideration. So there's a general basket of goods and there's your basket of goods, and you should just be cautious of that. Yeah.
Thank you all. I appreciate, and I'm sure the participants appreciate your honesty on that question. So thank you. Another question. So is it hard to return back to your home country? I don't know if any of you have returned back to a job in your home country, but is it kind of hard to go back? Is there, you know, you hear the term reverse culture shock. Can you talk a little bit about that if you have any experience around that?
I mean, I haven't tried to work back in my home country, but I can attest to the reverse culture shock and some of the things. So I don't know how much of it is maybe a change in industry and then the change in region, but you know, it's some of the things you think, oh, how was that kind of normal before? But yeah, pros and cons, and I think if you do ever decide to go back, you'll only be richer for your experience. So I don't think it can be a bad thing. So you kind of take what's good and leave what's bad, and hopefully you can bring both of those things with you, but apply them, you know, in the right way.
100% agree with Layla. I mean, I also have not gone back to the US other than just visiting, but I can only see it as positive and benefit. So I think there's things that you would miss about your new home, just as much as the things you miss from your old home. But in general, I don't think it would be that difficult to go back or to shift to a different place too.
Great, thank you both. So this next question is around getting an MBA. So from your experience and then just in general, do you think that you are in a better position to get international and global opportunities if you have an MBA? Maybe if you have an international MBA, how does that set you apart? Can you talk a little bit about your decision to get an MBA and how that maybe set you up for where you are?
So, I mean, I would not have got my job without the MBA. That was a requirement of the job. So I would say it's definitely set me up for my current role. Could I have immigrated? Yes, I could have definitely done that. But it would have probably been in something very similar to what I was doing before the MBA. So the MBA just kind of, you know, MBA is not something that was very highly considered in my own country. But in Europe it is, you know, and the US. So as much as, yeah, I think it's still important. I think people still look at that. They still consider it a good thing that develops good skills. And yeah, I mean, people say, you know, was it worth it? Is that your question? For me, I can definitely say it was. It was a confidence building. And I think that's also priceless. But yeah, I think that it kind of opened my eyes to a lot of opportunities that I just didn't know about before. So yeah.
And I agree with Layla. I think the experience you get of doing an MBA and like being abroad for 2 years, meeting, or even at home, meeting people from all over the world, it's a super, super incredible experience. I would say it for value internationally, I think it depends on where you want to go live and work and what kind of companies you want to work with. An MBA is a US fabricated education. It's huge in the US, really, really well respected. I went to a lesser known school in Europe for my MBA. I had some friends who tried to go back to the US after competing with US MBA programs, and it was very difficult. There's also some countries in Europe, it's not as well respected, or the value of an MBA, they don't see a reason in paying you more for it that you could get through regular business experience. So I think it really depends on where you want to go and where you want to work after. Again, the 2 years were my best 2 years. I'm super, super happy I did it. But again, thinking long term, is it the end all be all way to get to where you want to go? You would really want to evaluate and think about that.
Totally agree with that. I wanted to live in the UK. I wanted to work in the UK, so I had to go to school in the UK. It didn't necessarily have to be an MBA. I think it's absolutely true. The challenges with that type of degree being recognized just slightly less than American businesses, but nevertheless, if you do any program in the UK, you can stay for 2 years, and I think that it was instrumental for my job prospects to work in the UK. So I completely agree with your point, being that you need to kind of map out where you want to go and where you want to stay in order to make some of those decisions.
Great, thank you all. We have time for maybe a couple more questions. So this person says, as a Black woman looking to work abroad post MBA, has anyone on the panel experienced or seen instances of racism and or sexism? We kind of talked about this a little bit before, but how do you navigate this abroad?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I'm from South Africa, so we've got a unique history of, you know, racism that was really, you know, entrenched in our country's history. So, you know, I wouldn't say, I would say different forms and ways you experience it elsewhere. But at the same time, I wouldn't, you know, maybe not unique challenges in that sense, but just learning learning the different ways to navigate it, and learning what you're dealing with, what the nuances are in the environment you're working in. So I would just say it really depends where you are. Unfortunately, I think sexism and racism are a reality all over the globe. And unfortunately, we have to navigate that wherever we go. And I think the question is, I won't say that it's worse in one place over the other.
Thank you for that perspective. Lizzie or Jessica, anything you want to add? I know we already kind of touched on this earlier too, with kind of knowing your, yeah, okay. So last question from the audience. So in the application process for MBA schools, they say, what are your career goals, short-term, long-term, in the middle? And this person is wondering, did your career goals change at all during your program? And if they did change, why?
I can maybe start us. So I'm not sure about your guys' program, but a lot of schools in Europe and the UK are 1 year instead of the standard 2-year American schools follow. So that does not leave you a whole lot of time to shift and like explore a lot of different pathways. So a lot of my classmates did kind of come in with at least like the general direction, general industry that they were hoping to get into, and like had a pretty set list of goals, because you just really don't have the time to pivot and explore as much as you would if it was a 2-year program. So for me, I came in, I knew what I wanted to get out of it. I knew I wanted to focus on sustainability. I had 3 areas of sustainability that I was interested in going for, and that really helped me to make decisions, because you're like completely overwhelmed in the first term with like networking events, meeting your classmates, keeping up with your coursework, navigating a new country. All of these things come at you at once. And so I think it is really important to be clear about your objectives. That's not to say it can't change, but the clearer you are and the more focused, the easier it is to kind of get the most out of the early days, especially.
All right. Jessica, do you want to hop in?
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree with Lizzie on like you don't want to change too much. So I came in knowing I want to go to a fast consumer goods company and I wanted to stay in Europe. My function of choice, I think, was still a little bit up in the air. So I thought I was going to go in more operational. I'm now doing more strategy, brand marketing space. So I think you have room to flex and play, but going in with one idea and coming out with like absolutely everything on the other side, timing is just really tight. Even in a 2-year program, the applications for internships start the October, November that you get there. So 2 months in. So if you want to test run a program and you want to see if this is the right career change for you, you kind of want to know where you're going early. So you have a chance, opportunity to work in that field and see if it's the right fit for you.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for answering those questions on the spot as well. I appreciate all of your insights. I know our participants do as well. And unfortunately, that's all of the audience questions that we have time for today. So I just wanted to wrap up by putting in a little plug for Forté. Follow us on, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you prefer. And our handle is @Forté Foundation. And we have some great resources on our Forté website. So not only do we have our webinars, but we have a specific Career Center tab, and there are some industry resource pages there. So you can learn about finance, technology, marketing, consulting, entrepreneurship, tons of stuff. So I encourage you to take advantage of this, take advantage of our blogs, continue coming to our webinars, of course, as well. And finally, a recording of this webinar and our other Conquer Your Career webinars are available on demand on the Forté website. And again, huge thank you to our panelists. You all are so wonderful, great insights today. Thank you for being so candid and honest with us with everything. And thank you to all of our participants for joining and asking some great questions. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.